Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on India's national broadcaster Doordarshan about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations, and India's contributions to major causes and needs around the world. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking a close look at India as a producer, seeker, and disseminator of advanced knowledge for the well being of humanity. India has been known as a knowledge superpower since ancient times and has carved a distinct image for itself as a Vishwaguru or teacher to the world. But there have been breaks in this process, and we are now trying to rebuild and revive India's stature as a knowledge superpower. So we're going to traverse this whole journey of India as a giver of knowledge to the world in this episode. And to talk us through, I have a very special guest joining me in the studio, who is the author of this very important book, Nalanda, How It Changed the World, Ambassador Abhay. Ambassador Abhay is India's former ambassador to Madagascar, former deputy ambassador to Brazil, and is a distinguished member of the Indian Foreign Service. He is also the author of multiple books on poetry and literature, and this happens to be his newest work. Ambassador Abhay, welcome to Indian Diplomacy.
Thank you, Professor Sreeram. I'm delighted to be on your show.
So, Nalanda, How It Changed the World. This is, a best-selling book, and we understand that it has stoked a lot of curiosity. So, for our audiences, Ambassador, first thing, the question is, what are the qualities and attributes that made Nalanda such a powerhouse in terms of knowledge production and dissemination worldwide for almost 1 millennium? You've written that from approximately 3rd, 4th century BC until the 14th century AD, traversing 1 millennium, more than 1,000 years. Nalanda produced extraordinary works in so many diverse domains of knowledge, and people flocked to it not only from across India but from all over the world, making it the premier university of its time.
True.
Right. So to start with, what was it that happened there that stood it apart?
So first of all, Nalanda gave us the idea of university itself. So today all across the world we have an institution called university, thanks to Nalanda. It is in Nalanda that from a simple Buddhist vihar established by Emperor Ashoka in 3rd century BC to its journey as a Mahavihar in 5th century AD, almost 800 years. That's the period how idea of a college and university gets born. And today, when we talk about Oxford and Cambridge, which come only in 12th and 13th century, when Nalanda is already passing through its sunset phase, they share the courtyard plan which evolved at Nalanda. So all universities today, irrespective of which university it is, they follow a courtyard plan. And that courtyard plan evolved at Nalanda. But what made Nalanda so unique and special was its location. It was close to Rajgrah, the first capital of Magad, and also very close to the second capital of Magad, Patliputra. And it had a sacred geography in the sense it was close to Bodh Gaya, but even before that, it was a very sacred place. So Nalanda is actually name of a naga or a snake. And that's why you see the cover of this book where there is a serpent surrounded by lotus flowers. These so this serpent lived in a pond which was full of lotus flowers surrounded by a mango grove. Now, Nalanda had some unique qualities apart from its location. It had an interdisciplinary curriculum. So it was at Nalanda where Aryabhat was able to, for the first time in human history, able to use or invent zero and use it as a digit. And why did that happen? Because the Sunyata, the philosophy of Sunyata of Nagarjuna, which was given in the 1st century AD, informed the mathematics of Shunya in 5th century AD. So you have a lineage of interdisciplinary learning.
So
at
philosophy
Nalanda
and mathematics,
and the mathematics,
the two
yes,
feeding off each other.
exactly.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, Nalanda's curriculum, it was a Mahayana Buddhist institution, but Nalanda's curriculum did not only encompass Buddhism. It taught everything which was known to mankind. And that's why you get the idea of a university, which has at its key is the universal, to cover the universal knowledge systems. So Nalanda, at Nalanda, we had grammar, we had medicine, mathematics, astronomy, logic, and so on. Nalanda had a rigorous admission process. So only 2 out of 10 were able to get through the university. And there was a Dwarpala Pandit who sat on the gate and who engaged people in debate and discussion. And only those who could answer the questions were able to get inside.
Yeah, I have writing on page 35 that there was a Dwara Pandit
Right.
who would engage in debates and ask very tough questions to those who want to come in. So it's like what we today call an entrance exam.
Exactly.
And most of them were turned back. So they were very rigorous with admission. So it was that very elite thing where, the sharpest minds would only be allowed to come in and then have an impact. Yeah. So high standards, basically.
Very high standards. And third was the international dimension. Nalanda attracted students from China, from Korea, from Central Asia, from Southeast Asia, from Tibet. So it was sort of a magnet for international students. It had an international outlook, an open exchange of ideas, and it had state-supported infrastructure. So once you entered Nalanda, you did not have to worry about where are you going to stay, what are you going to eat, who is going to take care of you. And Nalanda had the world's best library in the first millennium CE, Dharmaganj, which was 9-storied tall and housed millions of manuscripts. So these were some of the...
And Ambassador, so you already mentioned interdisciplinarity. Let's go a little deeper. I mean, Nalanda and other universities inspired, like we have the Vikramshila, we have Somapura, and...
much later. Yes, during the Pala period.
Yeah. And there was the Takshila before Nalanda.
Much before Nalanda.
Now, if you take the universe of all these institutions, what you are showing is also that they were producing a lot of secular knowledge.
Right.
Not only spirituality and religion and philosophy and those sort of things.
Correct.
Which are linked to Buddhist and Hindu tradition, but also, like you said, math, science,
right.
And you go medicine, and there's so many inventions or discoveries there that you show traveled all over the world.
Correct.
And began to be adopted in other parts of the world. So our ideas and our discoveries were actually shaping the ancient world as a whole. So what explains that? I mean, because normally our notion is that India as a civilization has been more focused on the spiritual and the otherworldly and non-materialistic aspects. But here you have monks and also what today can be called secular scholars,
right,
mingling among each other, learning from each other. And not all of them are only talking about religion and the life after death and those sort of questions, but they're also focusing on real material world and needs of the material world.
Correct. So see, in Nalanda, when the Nalanda, whole university comes around the stupa of Shariputra, who is a great son of Nalanda, and he's also known as Dharma Senapati. He is the Buddha's first chief male disciple. And Emperor Ashoka builds the stupa. The largest, tallest structure you see in the image is actually stupa of Shariputra, which turned into a chaitya. And whole campus of Nalanda is built around this chaitya or this stupa. So the first structures were clustered pattern of structures. The first monasteries which were founded at Nalanda. But later on, you have a linear pattern of evolution where the monasteries and the temples, the chaityas, are separated. So you have one clear line, a row of the viharas or the monasteries where students live, where teaching happens, and you have one row of temples where the spiritual practices happen. So you have a clear separation in Nalanda from 5th century onwards of the secular and the spiritual part. Now in India particularly, the ancient India did not separate spiritual and material as such, as we have the notion today. And the quest was to search the nature of reality, to search for truth. So Nalanda students did not go for seeking a job, that they will pass out and they will get a job, but they were looking at the truth. They were looking at what could be the nature of reality. So in that pursuit, they were studying everything which was known to the mankind. And that's how you have the idea of a university coming up. And Nalanda had an integrated approach. So not only, scientific subjects were taught there, as I said, talked about mathematics of Aryabhat. In fact, Aryabhat, he's the foundational sort of mathematicians for the mankind, because he comes up with the concept of zero.
And you mentioned that it's almost 1 millennium before Copernicus or Galileo.
Exactly.
He had already figured out
that
so many questions.
On its, yes. Yeah. And his principles, actually his book, Aryabhatya, which gets improved by Brahmagupta, another Indian philosopher, and then gets translated as Sindh-Hind in Baghdad, and gives rise to algebra and algorithm, all the key mathematical concepts you need today for AI, for, but that was a revolutionary thing, the introduction of zero. And when from Baghdad, the zero got introduced and Indian numbers got introduced in Europe in 12th century by a person called Fibonacci, from Baghdad to Italy, that gave birth to the European Renaissance. Because, before that in Europe, all the Roman numbers were being used by the 12th century. Right. It's the introduction of Indian numbers and zero which gave rise to, fast calculation.
So viewers, many, core fundamental ideas and concepts on the basis of which we construct our, mental universe, they all came from Nalanda. And Ambassador Abhay is saying it's not only Asia, but also what is today Middle East or West Asia and beyond Europe, and what then became known as the known world. All of them, essentially, these have traveled from our knowledge hub, which was Nalanda. And that's something very significant. And that's why we do have a claim to being a Vishwaguru in the past. But coming to, more recent times, Ambassador Abhay, the era when we were the Vishwaguru is undisputed. You have mentioned the Chinese travelers like Xuanzang, who are also, praising India profusely for bringing knowledge to their lands. But now, somewhere there was a break.
Right.
You talk about the decline of Nalanda, the Islamic invasions, the destruction of these great monasteries and universities. And you also talk about the, the loss of patronage and all these things. So, our higher education ceased being, globally influential at some point in history, few hundred years down, before now. So where do you think we lost this genius that we had inherently in us, or it was suppressed, or it did not go forward to future generations after that trailblazing 1000 years or so?
So see, the break happens in 12th century AD. And that's the critical period when you also have the formation of Oxford and Cambridge, and how the idea, today, if you look at the quads and courts of Oxford and Cambridge, they come from Nalanda, and the same architectural pattern which is used by Nalanda and the other universities. And this journey of the university campus and the idea of the college has been very well documented. But what happens in 12th century, that India becomes politically unstable. Because of infighting. You have by the 10th century, you have tripartite competition, You have the Rashtrakutas in the south, you have Palas in the east, and you have Pratihars in the west. They are fighting each other. And India becomes politically weak, economically weak because of infighting. And then it leads to the, invaders from the northwest of India who come to, Delhi Sultanate is founded in 1206. You have Prithviraj loses the battle against Muhammad of Ghor. And you have the fall of the Gahrawal dynasty, which is the last dynasty to rule Magad after the Palas. So this, after the fall of Gahrawala dynasty, you have the three generals of Muhammad of Ghor. One is, of course, Qutbuddin Aibak, who founds the slave dynasty in Delhi. But you also have Bakhtiar Khalji, who comes to Nalanda. I mean, there is no direct evidence of him coming to Nalanda, but he goes to Magad, and he goes to Odantpuri, which is just 12 kilometers away from Nalanda, and destroys it. So you have, a political vacuum in India. He moves only with 200 horses and destroys these places. But you also have economic and political weakening of the Indian subcontinent. So that is the period when we lose it. And
so in other words, what you're saying is we need to have actually a strong polity.
Yes.
To house and back these high quality educational institutions.
Of course.
If the state or the empire is weak,
yes,
then we become subject to dissolution.
Exactly.
Or decline.
Look at when Nalanda, the Sariputra's stupa is founded in the Mauryan period by the
Ashoka's time.
When
there was a strong state,
yes, and after that you have continuous strong state. Who founds the concrete structure of Nalanda? Nalanda becomes a Mahavihar during the Gupta dynasty. So it's and then you have the Gupta's rule for centuries. Then you have the Harshvardhan coming, another very strong, yes, and that's followed by the Pala rulers. And Palas, the great Pala dynasty rules Magad for almost more than 300 years. So you have political stability in the continent. And Nalanda and other educational institutions in India, there was not only Nalanda, you also have the University of Ballavi, which was equally famous during the time of Nalanda.
Yes.
We don't talk much in Gujarat, but Ballavi was a center of Hinayana, and Swensang also visits Ballavi. So Nalanda was not a single institution, lots of institutions.
As you mentioned,
the whole ecosystem was there.
Right. Coming to today, Ambassador Abhay, now that the colonial plunder and the destruction and all that we have overcome, and we have again formed a coherent and strong state, Republic of India. We have now re-established a Nalanda University close to the original site in your native district of Bihar, and with a lot of foreign partners and support coming in. So you are also Deputy Director General of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. The ICCR hosts thousands of Indian students, international students, giving them scholarships to come to India and study, and many of them express gratitude for the learning that they're still getting from India, especially from the global south. And then another new phenomenon has happened. Branches of our Indian Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Management, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, and also private Indian universities are setting up overseas, branches where, thousands of students are also gaining from Indian knowledge and Indian professors. UAE, Tanzania, Uganda, to mention three countries, we have, we are setting up branches of our universities there. And although we may be behind Western and Asian universities in the world rankings today, we are trying to catch up and improve our practices at home. Here also, we have a large number of universities. So the question is, that glorious, tradition of Nalanda, this open inquiry, this recursive debate method, and all the scientific method, all these things which you trace to Nalanda, how can we bring them back?
So I have 5-pronged strategy for that. The first is that we must have quality education, and that includes, emphasizing on original research and taking a cue from Nalanda, interdisciplinary studies. Why Nalanda had Aryabhat and Jiro? Because they were original thinkers, original researchers, and they had this interdisciplinary learning. So, and innovation. I think these 3 pillars of quality education, these 3 will ensure that we have quality education. Second, global outreach. Nalanda was the first experiment in global education in India. So you had not only students coming from India, but all across the world, the known world that time, from Asia, from Central Asia, whatever places,
Southeast Asia.
So we must create again vibrant and inclusive campuses which can attract global students. The third is the cultural confidence. We must, whenever I go somewhere to speak and I ask about, do you know about Nalanda? Very few people know about Nalanda, and they don't know about Aryabhat, they don't know about Brahmagupta, They don't know that Indian
Or
numbers are
Nagarjuna.
Indian
Yeah,
numbers, or
yeah.
Nagarjuna is Shunyata, or the one of the greatest philosophers mankind has known. So we must develop this cultural confidence. What colonialism did, that it took away our cultural confidence. So we must have confidence in ourselves, and we should really think that we are capable of great things. We should not really, I mean, people talk about Oxford and Cambridge, but they don't talk about Nalanda. But before Oxford and Cambridge, there was Nalanda, and thanks to Nalanda, that all the universities became possible. So this is very important, and we must include the intellectual traditions of India, the India's rich intellectual traditions, in the modern curriculum. So that's the third thing. Fourth thing is policy and funding. So we must ensure sustained public and private funding, investment in higher education in India.
Patronage, you showed in the book also,
right,
that the rise of these great universities in ancient times
right,
across our land was closely linked to patronage.
Patronage, true.
By the state and also by wealthy donors.
Exactly.
So the same holds true, right? Where
True.
it may be technologically a different era,
Different
maybe
era.
so more globalized, more interconnected, but the same holds true.
True
isn't
even
it?
today. So we must see Nalanda declined when the patronage declined. After the great Pala dynasty, there was nobody to fund Nalanda, and therefore the institution declined. It was already in the sunset stage when it was destroyed. So it was coup de grace, I mean, what you call it, So and the fifth pillar and the last one is the academic freedom, which is very important. Nalanda encouraged critical thinking. It did not so any dispute at Nalanda was solved through debate and discussion. There was no, in the history of the institution, there is not a single case of fight or violence among teachers or students. They, on other sects, Nalanda did not teach only Mahayana Buddhism. It taught all the 18 sects of Buddhism. It taught Vedas and the Puranas. And anybody was welcome to Nalanda to come for a debate. And whoever won the debate was declared a winner. It was not...
You've given some very interesting instances.
So academic freedom today, we can take the cue that it was only possible because there was a culture of freedom, a culture of universal expression. There was no bar on what you can say, what you cannot say.
And today, of course, now we have women in the universities, in the academia. In those days, that was not so.
Right.
And we have, so it's more equitable. But at the same time, the question really is of excellence.
Right, right.
That, the urge for excellence at all costs, that is something I think we need to revive in a big way, isn't it?
True.
And, when Nalanda, the new revived university was opened, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke about that, and the need to, ensure high quality, governance and administration. All these are critical, isn't it, for universities to succeed. But the fact that we did it once in the past, and our own ancestors, we Indians did it, means that we can do it again, isn't it? And that's what the most important takeaway for me is the self-confidence or the confidence part, cultural confidence, and having the belief that we are no less to anybody. In fact, we have actually educated the world at one time. It's not an arrogance, isn't it? I mean, sometimes people say...
It's fact. It's historical facts, How what Nalanda has contributed is historical fact. I'm not saying anything out of my whims and fantasies. It's all backed by solid research and how the idea of college and university travels from.
Absolutely. Last point, Ambassador Abhay, you are now at the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. We do a lot of educational diplomacy, and I mentioned some of those where we bring a lot of students from around the world to study in our different institutions. We are also setting up branches there. Is there more we can do as a state and as a society to do this educational diplomacy, which will also help to build upon the legacy of this attempt to again become a knowledge superpower? It requires some degree of educational diplomacy and outreach and partnerships, isn't it? And the new Nalanda University, more than a dozen countries are partnering with us.
True.
So do let our audiences know what we can do with educational diplomacy as part of our effort to rebuild our stature as the Vishwaguru.
Right. So first of all, is the investment in education. We need to have both the government and the private sector or the philanthropist, coming together in this, recreating our glorious past in the education sector. Recreating in the sense that, reimagining our past for dynamic academic environment in India, and what can be done. So first is that we already have a national education policy, which is the new one, NEP, and we would need probably also CSR funding for education, which could add to the quality education, and also international collaborations. I think these are the three pillars on which we can build a shared vision that sees education not merely as a service sector in India, but rather as a civilizational pillar. Because see, India was great, or Vishwaguru, when India was superpower in education field. Today, if you think of some countries where Indian students go, what is their greatest soft power? It's the educational institutions.
America. Why do they flock to America?
Take out Harvard or Stanford from there, and what remains? So it's important that we in India should create those institutions today. And if we will able to create, the dynamics, or the soft power dynamics, and hard power dynamics, they will both shift, because you need the education is your backbone on which you build everything.
And our embassies, high commissions, we have educational attaches who usually support these, and counselors and so on.
True.
And probably we need to do more there. And the ICCR also works towards that, and we value that.
But much more than ICCR and government doing it. Let's take example of US. They do not have anything like that. Students are going themselves there.
It's just the quality.
It's the quality. It's the power of the institutions. So if we create these institutions in India, world-class institutions, and that is possible through NEP, through CSR, through international collaboration. Look at the collaboration between the universities. So I think
that is happening. So we need to have that open outlook to the world, and also based on core, national, vision for India as a knowledge superpower. Viewers, very, educative discussion with Ambassador Abhay, and this new book, I recommend it, Nalanda, How It Changed the World. It should give you a sense of what has been done and how we can replicate it, because ultimately it is not just a work of history. Historians can keep on repeating what happened, but how do we recreate that glory again? And for that, we will need this vision, this openness, and this willingness to think big about education, as Ambassador Abhay says, as a civilizational pillar and a cultural pillar of this country, and one of its main global public goods that India is producing for the world, and has done in the past. Because if you just see it as a business to admit students and to give degrees, or if you simply see it as a non-profit venture just for social good, that is not enough. We have to think about how it is part of our core civilizational heritage, and that is how we can recreate the greatness of Nalanda. Let me thank Ambassador Abhay for being here and for writing this very, very interesting book.
Thank you so much for having me, Professor.
Viewers, the story of Nalanda is not over. We have a new Nalanda University, and there are many others that are now vying to be highly dynamic and world-class. World-class is what we have been. Our ancestors showed the way, and we can again be a knowledge superpower if we have the right kind of vision, leadership, as well as implementation with public-private partnerships. That's the main lesson. So India is restarting its journey after the break of colonialism to once again reclaim its status as Vishwaguru. And it's not for us to proclaim that we are Vishwaguru. The world has to do that, and that will only happen if we bring back the excellence and the glory of Nalanda. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.